Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Dan Cohen with MintPress News here. Apologies to everyone who's been waiting. We're starting 19 minutes late. Let me just tweet out that we're live now, and we will have a great episode with our guest today. Okay, tweet it out. Okay, so um again, I'm Dan Cohen with MintPress News. Today, I'm going to be talking about the election of Gustavo Petro in Colombia, the left-wing candidate who just won, who's the president-elect, won a somewhat close race, but it's a very historic race because Colombia has never actually had a left-wing president win. It's always been the left-wing candidates in previous years, especially in the around 1990, were assassinated. So, and in 2016, the Petro was defeated by Ivan Duque with the help of drug traffickers who bought a lot of votes. I have a really great guest. We have Víctor de Currea-Lugo, a longtime Colombian journalist. And I have to say it's pretty difficult to find any Colombian journalist who speaks English. I felt, like in my work in Colombia when I was there and the work I've done and following Colombia over the last few years, it feels like a little bit of a separate world. All of the incredible scandals that happen there just don't get any attention in US media. So, the anti-imperialists and anti-war movements are really not very clued into what's happening in Colombia. And and this is a country that plays such an incredible fundamental role in US control over Latin America, which is, something we'll discuss. I think it's the most important country for US imperialism in Latin America. So the implications of Petro's election are really huge. I want to, yesterday when we did this, before I ended the stream, we had uh, um, a just basically a hiccup. Victor wasn't able to join us at the last minute, um, and so I gave kind of a history. I want to just give a really. I don't want to keep Victor waiting a long time, but basically, I think in order to understand how important this election is and how significant this election is, and for the future of Colombia, you have to understand the past, the history. And so Colombia's, just briefly, I'll explain my understanding. Just Colombia has been its recent history, though, basically during the Cold War and up to today, has been shaped by U.S. empire, and the 52-year civil war that formally ended in 2016 with a peace accord was basically a product of the U.S. coming in and telling the Colombian government what to do and how to do it, and especially since 2000 with Plan Colombia, and then in recent years. So um, I don't want to spend too much time on that just because Victor is waiting and there's a lot to talk about there. So let's bring our guest in. Hey Victor, can you hear me?
Yes, I
All
can
right.
hear.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for joining us. Um, so, first of all, what is the feeling? What is your feeling? What's kind of the popular feeling in Colombia? What 3 days after Gustavo Petro won?
Well, this is amazing because we were like, under the power of the control of the two traditional political parties or the elites during more than two centuries. There is not a single government that can be called leftist or progressive or popular in the Colombian history. Then I was particularly really afraid because some candidates in the elections in the past were killed before the elections. Not only in the local level or regional level, but also in the national level. We have a lot of important candidates that were killed just few months or few weeks before the election. I was really scared that Petro could be killed. Fortunately, it doesn't happen. And we were really scared about the possibility of fraud. But finally, it was the despite all these afraid, finally the elites recognized the triumph of Gustavo Petro in the election. We were really in shock, and it was really, it's like a bunch of different feelings. First of all, because we were thinking about the victims. We were talking about missing people, more than 85,000. We talk about the disappearance. We talk about the people killing in the war, in the internal armed conflict, more than 250,000 people. We talk about the millions of displaced persons and people who die. A lot of social leaders killed in this process to finally get the power, and we are still celebrating, let's say.
Right. I mean, just to contextualize that a little bit, when you talk about presidential candidates being assassinated, the most famous, of course, is Luis Carlos Galan in 1990. I believe he was assassinated.
In
Right.
1989, but
89.
he was part of the Liberal Party, means one of the traditional elites, even though he was killed. The next year was killed the leader of the one Communist Party, the Patriotic Union, the Unión Patriótica, in March 1990, and 1 month later were killed Carlos Pizarro, the leader of a guerrilla group who make a peace process, and after the peace process he was killed. Then, but we have another one before, and a lot of leaders that try to be candidate to the local governments or department governments. Then it's like a tradition, let's say, in the most brutal way, to eliminate the alternative candidates by violence. Then
Right.
for us, it's still a dream, like some people, we are not realize what happened last Sunday.
Right. Right. So you have these very popular national political figures assassinated in the lead up to the 1990 election, and not only the leaders, the rank and file, like thousands of people from the Patriotic Union Party were basically just murdered in mass by paramilitaries and by essentially the state. I did an investigation last year. I'll put on screen here about the extermination. What was actually a court ruled was a political genocide
Indeed.
um, of the Patriotic Union, and this was actually something that this was something that was crafted at the highest levels by the president at the time, with basically advised by an Israeli Mossad, former Mossad agent, and that they basically just decided we're going to exterminate the left because we can't defeat them at the polls. So yeah, I mean, just to kind of reinforce what you're saying, Victor, the significance of Petro winning when there are all these fears of a gunman assassinating him. There are, of course, the paramilitaries continue to assassinate huge amounts of people, and in 2016, well, there have been so many political figures assassinated, and then, of course, as you said, there have been so many social leaders assassinated too. So you have something like 1,500 social leaders assassinated since the peace accord was signed, and around 300 some ex-combatants from the FARC who have been assassinated too. So Colombia has been just an incredibly has a very very bloody history, and tell me if this figure is correct or this is correct, but
Yeah.
through all the years.
Unfortunately, yeah. Unfortunately, you're right. And it's like when you think about the big goal of the peace process in Colombia is to stop the killing of civilians. Just see, this is a huge objective. And the most important is that the elites in Colombia always try to resolve, the contradiction, the political contradiction, killing people. As you mentioned, it was a political genocide. This is the legal definition. When you attack a leftist political party and kill more than 5,000. Later on, is all these alternative voices has been or persecuted or has been accused, by um, false accusation, and right now some of them are in jail or in the exile. Then for us was like, in the Latin American perspective, the Venezuelans elites accepted the triumph in the elections by Chavez or Lula in Brazil or Evo in Bolivia, but we didn't expect that the elites in Colombia would accept the results. Finally, it happened, but now we know that we have to confront, to challenge a big opposition. You remember the measures supported by USA, by the way, against Allende, the president of Chile in the 70s, the campaign of the against Nicaragua Sandinist revolution in the 80s, the economical measure against Cuba in the 90s, and the decision in the last decade against Venezuela. We know that now the decisions in the media, the political decision, they try to contaminate the environment in Colombia, the political environment, with a big lies, like about the price of the dollar, about the investment, the foreign investment in Colombia. They try to create some kind of economical panic to affect the governance of Petro. Despite that, Petro is not already the president. The president is still the Ivan Duque. But now it's like we really believe that there is a complot between the economical actors, media actors, political actors, in order not to allow the Petros government to develop his program.
Right. Well, so I mean, I want to talk about who Petro is first. He's, I don't, from what I understand, he's not like a Castro or a Chavez or like a revolutionary figure. He's more kind of, he's on the left but closer to the center than like someone calling for revolution. And hold on, let me say this, and then you tell me exactly if I'm wrong. Or I've seen he's said some statements about Nicaragua attacking the Daniel Ortega and accusing he had a tweet comparing. I'll show you here. I'll pull the tweet up. And this is not because I want to attack Petro or anything or the election. I just want to have an appraisal. So I'll translate so everyone can see. But he compared Ortega to Áñez from Bolivia, the coup leader who massacred a lot of protesters and these kinds of things. Also, but at the same time, he has spoken about Assange, Julian Assange. And wait a minute, are we looking at the right one? Yeah, so we're looking at the right one. And then if we can get to let me just get to the right tab. So, like here, for example, he's spoken even as recently as 6, 7 months ago. He's spoken in support of Assange, which obviously the U.S. is not going to like. I mean, we can, this is from January 2021, speaking in support of Assange. And you can look at his tweets going back to 2010. He's spoken very forcefully for Assange. So it's not exactly clear to me where he stands. Also, he's had some kind of run-ins, some words with Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president. So overall, what is your assessment of Gustavo Petro's political consciousness and his program and what he wants to do?
Okay. First of all, let me precise that Gustavo Petro was a militant of the guerrilla group called M19, M19. But this guerrilla was not a Marxist guerrilla group. Let's say it was a social democratic guerrilla group. If you are familiar with the history of the Latin American rebels, it's more close to Montoneros or Tupamaros in Latin America rather than the Marxist-Leninist guerrilla organizations. Means these militants of Gustavo Petro was close to the flags of the Social Democrat proposal rather than the Marxist proposal. Later on, he took part in a peace process and he gave up the weapons 32 years ago. Then try to say like Petro is a guerrilla member is really, it's like not the best exactly statement, right? Because he resigned to use the weapon 32 years ago. He was taking part in the Senate and he confronted the paramilitary groups and the corruption and, some kind of issues that any kind of democratic person will support. The state, the rule of law, the welfare state, it's something really elementary. Now, the proposal of Gustavo Petro right now is not a Marxist or Leninist proposal. He don't vindicate any kind of authoritarianism. He has taken distance from governments from Nicaragua and Venezuela, even though he is clear the need to create a block of unity in Latin America. In his speech after the recognition of his triumph in the election, he clearly called for a Latin American unit, and he called the Colombian people to feel like Latin America, not only Colombia, but part of the region. This is important. Now, the political proposal of Gustavo Petro are based on rule of law and welfare state. Means he even used a statement in his speech saying like we want to develop the capitalism. Now,
right.
To put in context, Colombia is really a pre-modern feudal political culture. We are really trapped in the past. Then, to propose to develop the capitalism is so revolutionary. Maybe if you are in Sweden, you will feel like it doesn't make sense for Sweden. Okay, but for Colombia, it's a big step. Just to respect the Constitution of 1991, just to guarantee the stop of violation of human rights by the army and the armed forces in Colombia, just to increase the investment by the state in elementary issues like education, health, is really revolutionary. If you analyze the Gini index in the Colombian case, for instance, Colombia is one of the most unequal countries in the world. We are always between the 5 or 6 or 7 position in the world in inequality. If you see the level of violence, for instance, 90% of the killings of trade union leaders happened in Colombia in the last centuries, in the last decades. When you analyze the level of disappearance, we have more people missing for political reasons that if you put together all the missing people from Chile, Argentina, Brazil, or Uruguay together. This is amazing. And we have, as you mentioned before, a political genocide. Then, just to guarantee the respect of the rule of law, the respect this social contract called constitution, if we increase the coverage, the access to health, the access to education, it's a huge step. In this way, Petro, you have to put him in the scope of the social democratic countries, and the social democratic policies or proposal, rather than Marxist proposal.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest issues, of course, in Colombia has been the peace accord, and the Duque government has been completely opposed to the peace accord. And if you look at the contents of this 2016 peace accord, for people who are not familiar with this peace accord in 2016 ended 52 years of civil war between the FARC, Marxist-Leninist Revolutionary Group, and the Colombian government, military, which was basically horrible for the country. And one of the parts of the accord, one of the main ones, was to extend the state services into the rural areas, which are just huge swaths of the country that get no services, and basically farmers around the country are forced to rely on coca cultivation, which of course feeds drug cartels that make all of the money, while the coca farmers basically live as slaves. And so I think this is the kind of development you're talking about, transforming these areas from just coca farms into kind of integrating these areas into the state's control. Is that correct?
Yeah, the peace process that you mentioned include 5 elements. The first one is the development of the rural area, the agricultural reform. It means the possibility to count on electricity service in the national level, especially in the rural area. Sovereignty, food sovereignty program, aqueducts, community aqueducts in the rural area, some highways. I mean, I have problems with the people say like this is Castro Chavism. I cannot imagine that a highway to sell and to buy products is Castro Chavism. This is a clear capitalism. And the second point was about political participation, because the participation in the political arena until last Sunday was just limited to the political traditional parties. The third one is related to the drugs issues, including the crops of cocaine and marijuana. And the fourth one is about the victims, and the fifth was about the end of the conflict. Unfortunately, the government didn't understood the importance to apply the development of the rural area and the political participation, as well as the how to manage the crops of the drugs, the illegal cultivation. Now, what is the problem? All this space that FARC abandoned, when FARC demobilized, they abandoned a lot of regions, has been occupied by another guerrilla group like the National Liberation Army, the ELN, or the paramilitary groups. It means the failure of this peace process, this huge values, unique opportunity, the government didn't pay attention properly and to develop the state, the welfare state in the region. It's not a matter of to send troops, it's not a policy solution, not a military solution, but a social economic solution. It was a huge issue. Then some people say in Colombia, and maybe you hear in USA, like the peace agreement try to give the country to FARC, give the country to the leftists. Not at all. It's to develop the country. Now, what some of the issues that were included in the peace agreement now are in the agenda of Gustavo Petro. And any kind of social democratic policy for Colombia have to take into account these points. Now, one of the most important points that you already mentioned is drugs issues. According to the experts, around 95% of the budget, the gains from the drugs business are in the international circuits. In Colombia, in the best case, only 4% of the money remain in Colombia. We put the crops, we put the killings, we put the blood, but you don't get the money. Now, part of the solution means a clear agenda, a clear commitment, of the international community, how to establish a international drugs policy, but is not killing people, is not persecuting the farmers who produce coca leaves as a criminals, as a big gangsters, because they are not. They just need to survive. And sorry to extend me 1 second more, but if you want to rural area, if you are a farmer living in the rural area in Colombia, you try to cultivate corn or potatoes, and it doesn't produce any single benefit for your family, and you have the possibility, the only option that you have is to produce coca leaves in order to survive, you will do that. Then we cannot criminalize the farmers. We have to look for comprehensive solutions, including the international market. And we have two examples: how to reduce the hectares of cultivation following the example of Bolivia, or how to fail following the example of Afghanistan.
Right. I mean, I was in Colombia in 2020, in December 2020, and I went to Argelia, Cauca. So this is a region, an area where one of the biggest coca growing regions in Colombia, and also one of the there have been many massacres, one of the most dangerous, so many social leaders killed. And I went there to investigate some of the massacres, and the farmers I spoke to, they made the exact point that you're saying, that they don't have any choice but to grow coca, that otherwise it's that or starve to death. And part of the peace accord was that they would do crop substitution, that the government would help them grow alternative crops and then get them to markets to sell them. And that's something that never happened. And in fact, after the peace accord, the production of coca continued to grow. And as you said, again, really important point, Colombians are not the ones making profits from these from cocaine, from coca. It's international drug cartels, Mexican and American, really, that make. I remember a study that was published in The Guardian that showed they make 98% of the profit, and then this money is laundered through banks, and so these are the things that were not fulfilled in the peace accord, that on paper were extremely important, but didn't happen. And so you're saying these are large, like how much of what was not fulfilled in the peace accord is part of what Petro wants to do?
Well, I think that it's possible, to the agreement, the peace agreement is a means as well as the policy by Petro. And we have to see what is the end of this policy, and is to modernize the rural area and to give another opportunities, but most that to substitute growth, we have to substitute local economies. And this is the most important. How we offer, for instance, some kind of rentability if you produce corn. Colombia, we import food. We import corn from USA. We have import even coffee. We import grains. It's a shame. That's the word, shame. We have you have been here, and you know how the level of fertility of our land is amazing, but we are not producing our food. And the discussion about food sovereignty is not a leftist speech. It's a reality, and Colombia can produce a lot of food to feed ourselves. It's simple. Now, the problem is that we have now dissidents of FARC. We have the National Liberation Army. We have paramilitary groups, and we have the presence of different cartels, drugs cartels. How to manage, how to deal with a lot of armed groups in the Colombian field? Well, one of the possibilities is to reopen negotiations with the National Liberation Army, to apply, to implement the agreement with FARC, and to look for another possibilities with the rest of the groups. You mentioned something really important, is the implementation of the peace agreement. I don't know why in many countries we have the tradition to sign a lot of papers, but a signature in a paper is not a reality. It's just a paper. If we don't implement these promises, we really fail. This is a confusion between what is a negotiation process, what is to sign a paper, and what is to implement. But peace is not a matter of just to sign a paper. Peace is the implementation of these goals. Otherwise, we will repeat again and again and again this cycle of violence that we have been suffering at least the last 70 years.
Right. I mean, obviously, the power structures that have supported Uribe for so long, and this whole political project of keeping Colombia as a narco state at war are not going away. So and they're very deeply embedded in the state. I mean, when I've been working on this documentary about Colombia, and the more I learn, the more I see how deep the control of drug cartels is. Not only drug cartels, but international capital capital that is like tied to drug cartels, that are inseparable, that can control institutions, control Supreme Court, control the Attorney General. So how is Petro going to be able to fight against this, or will they just make it impossible for him to achieve anything? So how do you see this process advancing against such powerful forces?
Well, the most important is maybe the statement by Petro last Sunday about the national agreement. He proposed already the national agreement, and in this agreement has received a positive response by some sectors, even center political parties from the center, but also even some sectors that they are so pro or clearly neoliberal politicians. Anyway, they agree. I mean, I think that there is a national agreement already about corruption, but about how to go beyond, how to not to create a new constitution, no, but to make a political social contract, how to renew our agreement, national agreements. Petro invites the other political parties. Several of them has joined this invitation. Then this is the first step. The second one is how to create the team to manage the country, and he has to include different sectors in order to guarantee a governance process. The other thing is related to the armed forces. It's necessary to modernize, but also to democratize the armed forces, because we have a lot of military traditions based on the internal enemy. The mentality is the mentality of the Cold War. The tradition is the tradition of the internal armed conflict, and even our police officers are really trained in the military way. And it means also to offer another kind of relationship in the international arena. I mean, I am really worried about the role played by USA and the USA military advisor, as well as the Israeli advisor in the Colombian situation. But look, everything is connected. The foreign policy, the internal policy, but the most important is for Petro, peace is the conclusion of the social justice. And in this way, a lot of actors has been involved how to go beyond the words. Now, the opposition, the right wings and the paramilitary structures, they will not make easy the task to Petro. We expected some difficulties. We already asked you as a civil society, as a USA civil society, to help us in order to accompany the peace process, to save the democracy, to protect the government against some kind of military threats by the Colombian armed forces. I see that you, the people who listen to us at that moment, can play important role in order to defend this process. We are not going to Marxist, Soviet, Leninist Colombian country. We are just trying to let behind, yes, the criminal practice, the drugs dealer, and the feudalism and pre-modern country.
Yeah, I mean, I think the military question is kind of the biggest one. I mean, we saw the role that the military played during the uprising across the country in 2021, and they acted not only the military but also police, which acted in kind of a military capacity, particularly the ESMAD riot police. But I think I wonder at what point, I don't know, would the military step in and carry out a coup, or is that more of a thing of the past? And perhaps, if Petro is really pushing something that fundamentally changes the character of the country for the U.S. and for international capital, are they going to seek to get rid of him? So would that be in maybe a military coup? Would that be in like a kind of legal, using like lawfare, as they did with Lula da Silva in Brazil, which is maybe a more modern way to give it like a nicer look? But do you worry about something like that being used to remove Petro from power?
Well, the Colombian army has no tradition for military coup like happening in other countries. Anyway, remember that in the case of Allende invited Pinochet to take part of the government, and finally, what happened? The same happened with Morsi 10 years ago in the experience of Egypt after the Arab Spring. And Dilma Rousseff happened something similar, or Evo Morales. Now, the question is, of course, we have to be aware that the coup d'etat is on the table as a possibility. But more than this is the action of the paramilitary groups. I don't know how familiar the people who listen to us are familiar with the situation of the paramilitary groups in Colombia, but they make a national strike with weapons, and they control like 1/3 of the Colombian country. This is important issue, and the capacity to develop an army strike in regions Colombia is a huge threat against democracy. Now, it's not only how is possible a coup d'etat, but how will behave the intelligence service, how will be the relationship with other countries, the risk of military action in order to provoke or to deteriorate the relationship with Venezuela or Nicaragua, for instance, or Ecuador or Peru. It's many things on the table. the relationship between some paramilitary groups and some body of the Colombian army, the need to democratize and make more civil or real civil the police forces. As you mentioned, last year we have a national strike, a really popular national strike, and the level of killings, for instance, was around 100 people were killed, most of them by the police in Colombia, and no one answered. There is not justice. There is not a rule of law in Colombia. Also, it's like a lot of threats, but one of them, of course, is how the armed forces assume the fact that the new president is a leftist guy and is not is not a person linked to the most important companies, to the market, the most important families in the Colombian political arena.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess just so people understand the paramilitary situation, after the peace accord was supposed to disarm, the government was supposed to disarm the paramilitaries, and that never happened. And then when the FARC disbanded, there were some of them, over the vast majority gave up their weapons, but a small number became what they call dissidents, where they refused to give up their weapons. Some of them, correct me if I'm wrong, Victor, some of them were ideological, but a lot of them became like basically mercenary kind of type. So they call them FARC disidencias, but they're not affiliated with the FARC. They don't have the ideology of the FARC. Then they just become like another, different groups of paramilitaries. So there are so many different paramilitaries, and basically they're always acting on behalf of big business interests like cattle ranchers and landowners. And if you're like a cattle rancher and you want some land to develop, you send in one of these paramilitaries and they kill a lot of people and the people leave, and then you can take over that land. So there are these huge amounts of paramilitaries that still exist, and that's what you're talking about. What about the I know that Petro has the ELN, the National Liberation Army, which is one of the smaller but maybe more important armed groups in Colombia that was not part of the peace accord in 2016. They have said that they are willing to negotiate a peace accord with the government under Petro, right? And then what about the Nueva Marquetalia, which is basically just to explain that, and correct me if I'm wrong. After the peace accord, there was a plot by the government, parts of Uribe's, who was the most powerful politician, to get some of the FARC peace negotiators in prison and send them to the U.S. and make them appear as if they were smuggling cocaine, selling cocaine to the U.S. And that actually failed. And so some of the top leaders said, okay, this is treason against the peace accord by the state, so we're going to create a new FARC. We're going to take up arms again and go back to armed struggle. So now you have the Nueva Marquetalia, which is an ideological armed group that is fighting against the state. And as I understand, it's been growing. So has the Nueva Marquetalia made any statement on the Petro presidency, their willingness to negotiate peace and reintegrate, lay down weapons and reintegrate? And the ELN, what is the possibility of peace with them?
Well, yeah, you're right. We can identify, just for in order to make simple the explanation of the dynamic of the armed conflict currently armed conflict in Colombia, three sectors. One is the National Liberation Army, as an organization is the biggest one, is the more with a clear political agenda. The second one is the new Marquetalia, the Nueva Marquetalia, that is like the dissident that we can call properly dissident of FARC. And we have another called dissident. They are called themselves dissidents, but they are more gangs, and we have paramilitary groups. How to act to put it together in order to guarantee a comprehensive peace agreement? Well, first of all, is to recognize that this vacuum produced by the lack of implementation of the peace process allow the growth of new political armed groups in different regions of Colombia. Beside the discussion how political or criminal they are, the clear response is they could survive and grow because the lack of willing of the state to implement the political process. This is one thing. Second one, the National Liberation Army tried during years to establish a peace process with the government. They established an agenda to negotiate. They established the agenda in preliminary meetings in Venezuela. They opened a formal peace process in Ecuador, in Quito, during a couple of years. But the question is that the government of the former President Santos understood wrongly the ELN. For them, was like the ELN was like a small FARC. Then it's just to add some words, and ELN will jump to the peace process with FARC. But it's really silly decision because they didn't realize, they didn't wanted to recognize the nature of the National Liberation Army. During the Duque period was not possible to reopen this process, and now on last Monday, the ELN make a statement saying that they are ready to negotiate with Petro government. There is a good expectation about that. What is the nature of this nature? The National Liberation Army is not defeated, and they don't feel themselves defeated. Then it's not enough the demobilization offer. They are asking for reforms in the national, social, and economic arena, what is totally compatible with the process, with the political offer made by Gustavo Petro during the election. The second one is the dissidents. Let's talk about the two kind of dissidents. The first one, Nueva Marquetalia, that we can call properly dissidents, they vindicate mostly the correct implementation of the agreements signed by FARC in 2016. Then there is a door open for reestablish a process and to implement properly the agreement made by the government in order to develop the rural area and all these topics that we already mentioned. But in this way, the guerrilla, the new guerrilla, the new Marquetalia, led by Ivan Marquez, would have another opportunity to reopen negotiations with the government. With the other small groups that called dissidents, we have to create some kind of more complex mechanism because they are not only a political, they don't have only a political agenda, but they have clear economic agenda. And we need to, but the most important is how to respond to the challenge of the drugs issues in Colombia and the drugs dealers, but also the drugs cultivation. Second, and the last one is related to the paramilitary groups. There is some exploration made during the Santos government that can be recovered in order to create to create possibilities. Now, I am talking about 4 different levels that can be called in different ways. You can talk about negotiation, you can call about the acceptance of the rule of law, whatever. Not to create one table, an homogeneous table for all the actors. You can develop 4 different tables with different names, with different velocities. It doesn't matter. But in order to solve the problem of the armed groups in Colombia, it is not this system that we use during the last, let's say, 40 years of to negotiate with one group and later on with the other is a failed strategy. And I see that we have to try with a new kind of a new model, and this model is to put all the eggs in one basket, a comprehensive peace agreement. I know that is more complex, has more difficulties, is slower than the other, but is at the end of the day is more effective.
So you see like a new agreement necessary, with the kind of different armed groups, the with all their differences, to basically achieve like a lasting, real peace for the country.
Yeah, that's the goal. But of course, we have to talk about not to prioritize about weapons. That's not the discussion. You know, when you have the money from the NARS for the drugs issues, you can buy whatever. You can buy a lot of rifles and weapons. You know, this is not the problem. It's not what to do with the weapons. The problem is what to do with the cocaine crops, what to do with the poverty, what to do with the exclusion. And later on we can talk about the weapon, but the weapon cannot be the axis of the peace building. The peace building should be the society, the it's like, just let me give you an example. I was talking I was working as a humanitarian worker years ago in the, sorry, I have a problem with my connection now. I was working in Africa in the in the with the genocide, during the genocide, and we have there 81 per each 1,000 children was the infant mortality, and we have in Colombia regions that have 80 per 1,000 alive. It means when I wanted to say is like we have data of mortality and morbidity in some areas of Colombia that are comparable with the data in Africa. When you have this level of exclusion, when you have a region that take days to get medical services, or schools without teachers, and you have a medical installation without doctors. I mean, it's like when we propose as being part of the civil society, as well as is try to do Petro, is in order to guarantee these two simple things. Is rule of law and welfare state. This is not too much in a country with resources to do that.
How do you see Petro's approach to foreign relations? I mean, obviously, Colombia has been heavily involved in the coup attempt in Venezuela, hosted Juan Guaido, held the Venezuela Live Aid concert in Cucuta, which I went to. Actually, I was there in Cucuta for that freak show. And Duque has taken a very, very anti-Venezuela, anti-Maduro stance, and now just today, I'll see if I can pull this up on the screen. We saw, no, that is not it. Oh wait, wow. Petro deleted his tweet. Oh no, there it is. Sorry, I got it. So he says that he's communicated with the Venezuelan government to open the borders and restore the full exercise of human rights on the border. And then also there was a statement from the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, saying that, let me pull that one up. That one saying There it is. Like I spoke with the president-elect of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, and in the name of the Venezuelan people, I congratulated him on their victory. We dialogued over basically restoring ties. So restoring ties and having peace between the two countries. We don't need to translate exactly everything, but obviously this is a major change from the Duque years. So overall, how do you see Petro's approach to the region?
Well, I think that the question is what is the foreign policy included by Petro in the statement last Sunday. He mentioned first of all the integration of the region. Second one, it means the to increase the relationship as a bloc of Latin American countries. Second one, is clear that he is ready to open the borders with Venezuela. Just to let the people know, we have 2,200 kilometers of border between Colombia and Venezuela. We have a lot of activity, illegal, criminal, but also legal. We have a lot of binational families in the border. It's people who there is not uh, a country. In fact, it was a writer, Uslar Pietri, who defined the Colombian Venezuelan border as a third country. The first one is Bogota or Caracas, and the second one is the other capital, and the third one is the border. We have a lot of migrants, Venezuelan migrants living in Colombia, almost 2 million, but we have already more or less the same amount of people, Colombian people, living in Venezuela.
Right.
Then it's a huge complexity agenda. Now, the mayor of Cucuta, as the most important city in the border, say that he really liked the idea to open the border because the economy of these regions depend on the exchange between both countries. Now, it's a huge market that Colombia, a lot of possibilities for market once they open the border. Now, also Petro insists that when we talk about America, we have to talk without exclusions. Then this beside the political options, we have to be together. He mentioned USA in his speech last Sunday, just to say like even the relationship with USA should take into account the environmental agenda. It was really good because it's to think about not not only thinking about Washington as the referent of the foreign affairs policy of Colombia, but we have to think about Europe. We have to think about the regions. We have to think about Venezuela. Now, in this idea, Petro want to put the country, to Colombia, to play a role in the arena of the environmental agenda, the climate change challenge, and I think that this is a new issue for the Colombian country. Is to be more independent, to be more to keep distance, a healthy distance, let's say, from USA authorities. In fact, despite many things that people used to say against Petro, the current president Duque, should wait 6 months to make a phone call with the President Biden. And now Petro has been elected, and 2 days after to be just elected, he was talking by phone with the President Biden, based on a respectful bilateral relationship. I think that the Colombia has a lot of potential to contribute to democratic issues, but also the environmental agenda in the world.
I mean, I'm looking. Let me pull up the tweet from Petro on his his conversation with. So, okay, we'll just translate into English. He calls it a more normal diplomatic relationship. He had a conversation with Biden, and Biden said a more equal relationship for the benefit of both peoples. So the question is, you know, I think it would be foolish to trust Biden, and to trust that the United States actually wants Colombia to have some kind of sovereignty or independence and chart its own path, especially considering how important Colombia is for projecting U.S. power throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. So certainly there should be a more equal relationship. But I can't help but wonder what the U.S. wants to do, how it sees, what possibilities it sees with Petro and power, and what agenda there really is. Because I simply don't trust. And I don't know about you, but how do you see the U.S. Colombia relationship changing beyond the words of what have been said?
Well, as you may know, Colombia has been called the Latin American Israel because to be
That
honest,
was Chavez. That
yeah,
was that was Hugo Chavez who said that first, right? The the
yeah,
the Israel of Latin America.
yeah, but this is not a big lie. I see that is close to the truth. If you think about the influence and the role played by Israel in the Middle East and the Colombian role in the region, but also the lack of democracy and double moral and the killing of civilians and the double standards and the lack of democracy. Well, it's a lot. Thinking about that, it's a lot of coincidences. I think that this was not a lie. Well, to be independent means concrete issues. For instance, Petro are talking about food sovereignty. Food sovereignty necessary put the discussion about the agreements, the economic agreements, the free trade agreements between Colombia and USA, for instance. This is an economic arena. The other point about is about drugs issues, because as we mentioned before, is a international challenge. The other element is the role played by Colombia during the government of Duque to provoke, to how you say, I don't find the correct word, but it's like to provoke tensions with Venezuela in the border.
Mhm.
And to support all this narrative trying to intervene in Venezuela and to provoke a binational armed conflict. It's all these elements are on the table. The most important is, of course, Colombia has commitments as a state with the United States. Colombia has to respect some agreement, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that Colombia cannot review some of these agreements, especially about the free trade agreements, about the to recover the independence, for instance, of the armed forces, the influence of the military advisor of USA in the internal development of the conflict, and the internal administration issues of the armed forces are really big one. Then I see that this is a process. Now, we cannot expect miracles. Of course, Petro has to go step by step, has to evaluate day by day the pros and cons, has to evaluate the the eventual economical measure that can take USA against the Colombian government. Has to evaluate the international investment, has to evaluate the claims of the civil society. It's like play a game and has to go step by step. This is not a revolution. It's not a Che Guevara and Fidel Castro taking the power in one morning in the 1st of January 1959. It's not the military triumph of the Sandinist revolution in Nicaragua. This is a process, a political process. Now, if the government of Colombia made mistakes, a huge mistake during these 4 years, of course, the right wing will go back to the power in 4 years. And we have to understand that one thing anyway is to go slow, and the other is to be stuck in one place. And we will see what happens. Of course, there is a lot of hope, a lot of hope. I have not seen too much people crying of happiness in my country.
Right.
But of course, a big challenge in front of us.
Right. I mean, that's definitely one thing, that no matter what happens from here, the election of Gustavo Petro is really an incredible moment, and I wish I could have been there for the election, but seeing the reaction from Colombian friends of mine and on social media, in news reports, is pretty incredible, and I think it was pretty shocking in a lot of ways for everyone to see, that this could happen. But myself, I guess the term I would use is cautiously optimistic, that Colombia, which has been through so much unspeakable horrors, and until the present day, could begin this political process. And so I don't know, I'm hopeful that something, that things will begin to evolve, but I'm also fearful for what the United States and its allies might try to do to stop that process from happening. Do you when you say this is, it has to be a step-by-step process, do you see any similarities with someone like AMLO in Mexico, who is obviously, not saying one day we're going to change everything, and is in Mexico, obviously a very violent country plagued by drug cartels, and there are similarities with Colombia, and he's taking a step-by-step approach. Do you see similarities?
Well, to be honest, I have not studied properly the Mexican case. Then I prefer not to give any opinion because I will be responsible. But anyway, I think that the Colombian government, the Petro government, has to study properly and quickly what happened in the attempt of transition in Brazil, in Mexico, in Bolivia, the mistakes made by our brothers and sisters from Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, Ecuador. It's like we are not talking about slogans. We have to talk about policy. When we cannot talk about dreams, we have also to talk about realities. And the most important for the Colombian people and the Petros, the big challenge is not to disappoint. Not to disappoint. I'm not talking about the businessmen. I'm talking about this poor country, this poor, the part of the country who votes in favor of the peace process, in favor of the social justice, in favor of inclusion. You will love to be here and to see how many indigenous people who were walking, by days, for days, to go by voting, and the farmers, taking boats and small boats, or the donkey, people collecting money just to pay a bus for go to for the voting places. Was really amazing. This bunch of people collecting small efforts, from one tweet to a fish in the street. Or it was big issue. Was a country really tried to win as they did. Then is the problem for me is not to what will say the government of Biden, or what is the opinion of the government of Zelensky in Ukraine. I don't care about. My priorities what is the opinion of what will the benefit, the concrete benefit for a farmer in a Cauca rural region, or for a female leader in the Black communities. This is the real goal.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, it's been a lot of struggle for so many people, especially in rural regions, but just throughout the country. And so whatever happens from here forward, there's no denying the achievement that's been made.
Indeed.
Okay, well, we've taken a lot of your time, and so we'll end it here. Victor de Currea-Lugo, thank you very much for your time, for your expertise, and look forward to doing it again.
Thank you so much, and please help us to understand our mistakes, help us to defend our success, and keep in touch with the Colombian people. We really need international solidarity in order not to fail, in order to success, not for ourselves, but for the Colombian people.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.